Good morning, everyone. Glad to see you all here. Can't believe it's May already. But time goes on, so we go on, right? I'd like to call the order the May 20th, 2021 TPA Governing Board meeting. With that, I will ask Mel Wilson if he could lead us in invocation.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We heard you. We saw you before.
Thank you. And thank you guys for allowing me to participate via Zoom. I have an urgent matter within the next 45 minutes. So let us pray. Oh, Heavenly Father, we're gathered here once again with bowed heads and humble hearts. Thanking you for your grace and your mercy. Realizing, Father, over and over again that through your grace and your mercy, you've been better to us than we've been to ourselves. And with that, we say thank you. Thank you, Father, for understanding that we seem to fail on doing what's right, and while we seem to succeed in doing what's wrong, and yet you still love us. Father, it's pretty evident that we're divided on our social and human desires. Please show us the way, Father, in order that we overcome our concerns in the spirit of love and kindness towards each other. You're the one we can always run to, Father. Help us to learn to turn to you first. And finally, Father, we ask a special blessing for the chairperson of this meeting and all of us whom you have allowed to be assembled here today, realizing that we are no strangers to each other, just perhaps friends who have not yet met. We give you all the praises and the glory. Amen.
Please join me in pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As we have been doing for the past several months, the meeting today is being conducted in person and also being done virtually using the Zoom platform. Instructions to join the platform. Thank you. Instructions to join the platform virtual meeting, as well as contact information and assistance is provided and published on our website. So with that, excuse me, I don't know what's wrong with my voice. Margie, can we call the roll at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chair. At this time, I am only asking those members present, attending in person to respond by saying here when I call your name. And for those in person, I want to remind you that when you hit the button on the base and the top turns red, then you're on and everyone can hear you. And then alternates, please also state your name if you are attending on behalf of a TPA board representative. Steve Wilson.
Yes.
Yvette Drucker.
Here.
Andy Thompson.
Thankful to be here.
Stephen Grant.
Present.
Shelley Petrolia.
Here.
Joelle Flores. Jim Koretsky.
Here.
Christopher McVoy. Joni Brinkman.
Here.
Catherine Waldron. Chelsea Reed. Melissa McKinley.
Here.
Maria Marino.
Here.
Maria Sachs. Greg Weiss.
Here.
Douglas Lawson. Michael Napoleon.
Here.
Christina Lambert.
Here.
Joseph Paduzzi. Robert Reinroth.
Here.
Fred Pinto.
Here.
We have a quorum in person, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, do we have anyone who's participating other than Mayor Wilson remotely?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I have Mayor Wilson is attending remotely. He noted that his significant circumstance preventing his in-person attendance is he has an important ribbon cutting ceremony at 11 that he cannot miss. It is for a big company that is bringing many jobs to the Glades area. And he is still on Zoom remotely.
Oh, and that's it?
Yes, at this time.
All right, does anyone here have an objection for Mayor Wilson to attend remotely and participate in the meeting? Seeing none? Okay, then we'll approve that he'd be able to attend and participate remotely. Are there any questions? No questions. All right, we're gonna, oh, excuse me. I don't know what's the matter with my voice this morning. I've just been talking too much this week. I don't know. Okay. All right, general comments from the public. As a reminder, there are 3 ways to provide comments, public comment for this meeting. One is written comments may be submitted online at the website provided in
Madam
the
Chair,
agenda, as I mentioned earlier.
Point of order, can we approve the agenda?
I skipped something?
Okay, well, my own, I'd like to modify the agenda if possible to have item 3C before item 3B. That's possible.
Why is that?
For
3C?
3C, so that we have information about pedestrian bicycle fatalities before we review the draft transportation improvement program. Thank you.
But why though? I don't understand the rationale.
Well, it's to have information because I'd like,
We're only getting information brief today, though. You know that.
I got a second, so.
Yeah,
that.
but I didn't accept the motion. I
So
would,
you're saying we don't have an agenda approved yet?
there was no proof. The agenda didn't need to be approved. You had a specific question, but we'll grant you that. We have a motion, a second. All in favor? Where do you want to move it to?
Just switching the item 3C in front of 3B.
So we want to go CB instead of
Correct.
BC.
That's right.
Okay. That's fine.
Thank
All right,
you.
I'm just pulling your leg.
No worries.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we let the record show that we moved the agenda item 3C before 3B. Make sure I don't inadvertently not do that. Okay, where was I?
General public comments.
I was talking about public comments, yeah. The other option is to provide verbal comments may be made by virtual attendee using the raise hand feature in the Zoom platform. And lastly, verbal comments and written comments may be provided in person. Anyone attending or submitting a comment card, those cards are available at the front desk. Okay, if there are no,
Mr. Chair, let the record show that Commissioner Reed and Commissioner Sachs have joined us.
okay. Did you get that? The
Yes,
record
sir.
will show that.
And then, Mr. Chair, at this time, there are no general public comments.
Okay, no one's got their hand raised and no one, all right, and no one submitted a comment card.
No, sir.
All right, then with that, then I'm closing public comments for general public comments and moving on to the next agenda item, which is E. This is comments from the chair. I'd like to share a couple of updates with the board. First of all, on April 21st, Nick and I met with Virginia Baker and other members of our staff to talk about mobility vision for Palm Beach County and options for implementation.
Fred, can I interrupt you for a second? We can't hear you.
Who's speaking?
Me? We can't hear you. Is his microphone working?
It's on. Is it on?
You're very, it's almost like you don't have it on.
All right,
It may
maybe
be
it's this
on, but I'm
microphone.
not sure it's,
Huh?
we can't hear you.
Is that better? I mean,
I'll adjust it for you.
I'm sorry. Well, I could hear you.
You can hear me without a microphone.
You have to up the volume or something? Is that a little bit better? Is that better?
It's better.
Okay, where was I? Should I go all the way back to the beginning? No, all right?
Call the meeting to order.
Okay. It's May, I guess. It's May. All right. As I was saying, Nick and I did meet with Virginia and her staff, and I like to characterize the meeting. First of all, overall, it was a very, very productive and positive discussion. Clearly, the discussion centered around the potential of this board. At some point, we asked this board to formally endorse this recommendation. We're not at a point where we're ready to ask the board to do that yet. But at some point, we're looking for this board to recommend to the county commissioners to establish a countywide, right now, looks like a penny tax as our new transportation fund or transportation fee for the county. There are as you can imagine, a lot of detailed components to this that need to be talked through with Virginia and her staff and the county. And we've embarked on that discussion, and we will continue the discussion. We will be meeting with them again. But I just want to say that at this point, the discussion has been very positive and very productive. But to underscore that point, then on the 30th of April, many of you joined us, I think, with members from Broward County and Miami-Dade at what we call the Southeast Florida Transportation Council Workshop, which was focused also on implementation of, well, in this case, commuter rail services on the FEC Railway. But for those of you who attended can see that there were much broader implications that we need to address on a collective regional basis between the three counties. But what I walked away from that is of significant importance for us to understand is that as a county, Palm Beach County, we're a little bit behind this race for space, so to speak. We don't have a funding mechanism in place, a separate independent funding mechanism in place for our mobility initiatives and transportation options in the county. And that's goes back to the first point I made of why we're having these conversations with Virginia and what we're looking for this board ultimately to hopefully recommend. But Miami-Dade and Broward are way ahead of us. They've got their funding mechanisms in place already, and they are posting many, many projects that they're going to be putting forth to improve their mobility capability in their various counties. So we're kind of playing catch up here as a county, but I think we will reach the point that we need to reach in the near term, in the near future. But for me, that was a very important piece to take away from that. The other thing I took away from that conference was that I believe Miami-Dade is going to kind of forge forward with what they want to do in terms of the FEC Railway. And I think we should be concerned and very alert to the issue of decisions that they may make independently from the other two counties and how that may impact us in the long term. Just something for us to be aware of. Nick and I are having many conversations about it, and we will have some follow-on conversations with the Miami-Dade representatives and Broward County representatives. I don't know how much progress that's going to make because they have money that they already have collected because of the funding mechanisms in place, and they're looking to spend those funds. They're looking to move forward with that. So just want to share those updates with you. You want to add anything to that, Nick? No?
No, I think you covered it very well.
Okay. Are there any questions on anything that I shared? Go ahead.
Just certainly, I would imagine all of us are supporting the fact that we need to find funding mechanisms for that. But looking ahead to the degree that, you went ahead and already began dialogue, which I'm fine with, but you suggested at some point we'd be making an ask. I've only observed for a number of sales tax initiatives how it's gone down. I haven't been a participant, right? So keep that in mind. But seems to me, one thing is you support the concept, and then there's another where it's in fact matured enough that you're asking for it officially. Usually that's when list of projects and stuff happen. And I just bring that up. I just want to say, because, I don't imagine in Jupiter, we're going to get a lot in the way of transit, yet there has to be a list that's going to attract everybody in the county before you go with the sales tax. So I don't know when you're going to come back, but I just thought I'd say that it's easier when you start to have a list of what's going to be included. And I don't know whether or not because I would think the county would participate even in developing that. So I would think that if we were to make the ask, so, you've initiated this along with Nick, which is appropriate, but just, give us a little bit more detail in the future about when you might be looking for an action and what it would be founded upon.
I told Nick this morning that someone was going to ask that question specifically that you just asked, but that's fine. Nick and his staff are very much working on this project, this concept. We don't want to come to the board unless we think we've got the questions that need to be answered or explained, and that we have a full concept agreement with the county staff and hopefully the county commissioners on what it is we're looking to do. Clearly, we have to be able to define for our citizens what they're going to get in return for this, what's going to be delivered. I will just say that I don't want to give you a specific date at this point, but we are working on this, and we will be looking to come to the board with a layout and all the information that we should have to ask for a formalization of that. I also just want to underscore this, that what we're talking about is creating something that's going to take us well into the future, perhaps 30 years into the future, in terms of creating a robust public transportation network. And we've talked about this before. The end goal is what? The end goal is to create solutions for our citizens so they truly have an option of not having to take their car to get to where they want to go. And that's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 5 years. It's going to be many years out into the future. And it's going to require us to embrace this in a visionary concept on where we think we want to take the county, or where we see the county at in that regard in the next 20 to 30 years. I think, Melissa, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I assume that this is a request that's not going to be made until the expiration of the current 1-cent sales tax.
Question number 2 that I was hoping someone would ask. In fact, one of the core components of our conversation with Virginia and her team was the status of the current infrastructure tax in place, and that they anticipate, in fact, that would be sunsetting at some point, and they certainly anticipated that. So the conversation was really, we hope we're not looking at creating a second tax, and that will still continue. The notion is that tax currently in place, that infrastructure tax would sunset, and this new transportation fee tax would then replace that at some point once it was put on the ballot and the voters would vote that in.
Okay, because to do that before the expiration of the current would make us the highest sales taxed county in the state of Florida. That wouldn't be something I could support.
I didn't hear the last part, but something about the highest sales tax. And
If we pass this before the expiration of.
oh,
the
okay.
Make us the highest sales tax
You wanna
county in the
comment?
state.
Go ahead.
It's an important point to
Yeah,
clarify.
it's a good point.
Absolutely agree. And I think the conversations that have occurred up to this point have been potentially putting a request on the ballot in November of 2024 with an implementation upon sunset of the current infrastructure surtax. So there would never be a point where both taxes were imposed upon sales within Palm Beach County.
May I ask you a question? Okay. Mayor Grant.
Yes. Thank you. First off, today is May 20th, Get Your Green On Day for mental health awareness from Palm Beach County. So I just wanted to recognize that.
Okay, that answers the question. No, I know it's that, but I didn't get that email, but thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yes. In addition, last Friday, I attended the TPA's Future Transit seminar, and I thought it was very important. Being the League of Cities representation on the Palm Trans Service Board, I've been talking for years to try to reduce the size of the buses for Palm Tran, and multiple times during the conversation, the consultants from around the country have said that having smaller buses make things much more efficient for getting people around. And we have that example in the Glades, where we have our Glades initiative with the smaller buses versus years ago, the bigger buses. A lot more riders are using that as transportation. And so those are my 2 comments. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? I'm sorry. Yeah, in front of me. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your absence at the last meeting, I had also raised the issue of the potential of a transportation surtax. And like Commissioner McKinley, it's important that we all understand that this needs to be after the sunset, not in overlapping with what is going on now with the IST. That being said, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done between now and 2024, and obviously this would be a citizens initiative at some point. I think that we should look at having some dialogue with Miami-Dade and Broward, since they have gone through this process, and Broward did not get their tax approved on the first try. So I think that there is some conversation that should be on a preliminary basis between members of either this body or the county commission to start having some understanding of the process to get the residents to embrace the idea of taxing themselves. Again, another percentage point for transportation. So while this is certainly something that we're not envisioning to happen for another 3 years or so, there's going to be a lot of work between now and then. And I think we shouldn't just put this off and wait. I think that we should start having those conversations. And again, I think reaching out maybe through CEFTEC at least to start, and then a direct conversation with Miami-Dade and Broward as far as their MPO TPAs or whatever they call them down there. And again, understand how they were able to succeed in getting the residents to embrace this idea. Thank you.
You want to comment? Yeah. We are engaged with CEFTEC members very, I would say, constantly to some extent on their experience and how they got to where they are now. But you said something that I think is important, and I think it would be wonderful perhaps if the county commissioner body engage in conversations with their fellow county commissioners from those two counties to hear it from them, all right, from their perspective on the road that they traveled. And one of the points of discussion we had when we met with Virginia and her staff, Todd Bellaren was there as well, was they shared the experience that the county went through in getting the current infrastructure surtax passed. And it really takes a campaign to get the word out and to get our citizens in the county educated and understand why this is something that would be good for them and what we're looking to deliver for them, because they're the ones who have to go to the ballot and vote yes or no on such an issue. So yeah, I think I agree with you that to the degree that the county commissioners would like to engage in dialogue with their fellow commissioners in those two counties, I think would be productive.
And we're very fortunate to have Commissioner McKinley as the president of FAC. So certainly she can be our liaison with other counties with respect to their experience in this regard as well.
Commissioner Weinroth, absolutely. And I also had the pleasure of working on the Sarasota County 1 cent sales tax way back when in my role as a staffer. So I will reach out to Miami-Dade County and see if we can help set that up. Mr. Chairman, I just had a feel-good comment. I was not able to attend our meetings in March and in April. And I thank Commissioner Bernard for being my alternate because of my role with the association. I was in Tallahassee. So this is my first meeting sitting next to my colleague here from Boca. And, 15 years ago, I was a stay-at-home mom and found myself in another leadership role leading the junior leagues of Florida at the statewide level, and came across a woman, another stay-at-home mom who was a member of the Boca League, who later also served as the president of the junior leagues of Florida. And I think this is a lesson learned, is you just never know who you're going to meet and where you're both going to end up. And I'm super excited to be sitting here next to Councilwoman Yvette Drucker from the city of Boca Raton. We came up through the ranks together. So happy to be here with you today.
Life's journey, you never know where it's going to take you and who you're going to be interacting with, but that's good to hear. Very good story. Any other comments?
Thank you. Just a couple, just wanted to share one thing with the rest of this committee, and that is we recently, at our last meeting on Tuesday, we approved on Prosperity Farms Road the funding of bike lanes going from North Lake all the way up through Donald Ross. So I wanted to make everybody aware of that. And then an issue had come up. I had a constituent issue over by the airport, and it had to do with an intersection at Green Street and Military. There was a new facility put in by a large aviation company, and it's an FDOT road, and there's some sightline issues at that intersection, made them aware of it. And the response was they looked at transportation data or crash data from 5 years previous. Well, there was really no use of that intersection 5 years ago. And so it was sort of odd, and I don't know if there is anything TPA staff can do to look at that intersection, maybe come up with some recommendations as to how that might be improved. But we now have hundreds of people that are working at that facility that are using that intersection.
Sure, we can investigate that, and I'll reach out to county staff on that one as well.
Well, I already reached out to county staff, but they kicked it over to FDOT, and FDOT's response was, well, we looked at the 5-year
FDOT.
crash
Right.
data, and it's like 5 years ago, there wasn't anybody here.
Right, so there's no data.
So there's no data.
Right.
We'll get to the bottom of it. Okay.
Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you all for your comments. I'll ask Dick to give us his executive director support at this time.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Chair. One point of clarification before I dive into the report content. Commissioner Weiss mentioned that the county approved a resolution for Prosperity Farms Road bike lanes. The resolution actually approved the county's proposed request for funding from the TPA to construct those Prosperity Farms bike lanes. So it's certainly a step in the right direction, but it wasn't approval of funding. It was a request for the TPA to provide the funds. And we're certainly excited to present that as one of the items to you in July that would be part of the proposed priority list for our local initiatives program that would allow for the funding to occur so that those can be constructed. It's an exciting partnership. Okay, handful of items. I'm not going to cover the entire report printed on the dais, but just the top items. The first one is I'm excited to welcome Melissa Murray as our new public relations director. Melissa is standing here in the audience, and we've had a lot of conversation about transportation funding and mobility visioning, and how are we going to engage our community? How are we going to ensure that what we're proposing is consistent with our community's values? And Melissa, we are so excited to have you on our staff to lead that effort and to work collaboratively with our county, with our cities, with all of our stakeholders as we shape that vision. So we're glad to have her on the team. And also wanted to remind the TPA board members, if you have not nominated a representative to serve on our Citizens Advisory Committee, you will be getting a letter from me this week reminding you of your opportunity. There are 7 of you that still have an opportunity to nominate someone to serve on our Citizens Advisory Committee. We'd love to have that fully joined, we'd love to have the membership complete for that group. Want to mention, and Robin, if you can jump to the second slide on this, the 2020 census update, April 26th, just late last month, the preliminary numbers for apportionment were released by the US Census Bureau. And once again, as has been true since 1930, so for the last 90 years, Florida has gained in the number of representatives in the House. So we actually went up by 1 in the 2020 census. And I just put the population numbers for our 4 most populous states on the map here, and wanted to mention that both New York and California went down 1, while Florida and Texas went up by 1 and by 2 respectively. So certainly a lot of people coming, and I've heard the remarks, the anecdotal observations that maybe more people than that are here now following the pandemic. But we have been a continuous growth state. And one of the items we're going to talk about later on is the federal update on federal funding. And one of the pushes that we're making in new authorization for funding at a federal level is to rely on these current population numbers for any formulas that determine how much money Florida should receive. We have a lot of people. Our share of the total population in our country is growing, and we want to ensure that the funding received on a federal level reflects the number of people that actually reside here in Florida. And Robin, if you can go back to the first slide. Handful of items I'm going to highlight for you just briefly, just to make sure you're aware that these exist. A big one from the last legislative session, Senate Bill 100 passed both houses, and it repeals the concept of multi-use corridors of regional economic significance. This was an initiative from, I want to say 2018. So 3 years ago, this was passed by the Florida legislature, pushing for 3 different investments in corridors in relatively rural areas that were not on the Florida Long Range Transportation Plan, but that were prioritized for implementation by the legislature. And now we've backed away from that. Several of the studies have been concluded, recognizing there wasn't sufficient need for those investments. And so the legislature has reflected that in this updated bill. Several of you are aware of House Bill 337 imposing caps on road and other capital impact fee increases on an annual basis. And I wanted to give you the bill number to research if you're interested in more details about that. Senate Bill 950 amends several laws related to bicycle operations and safety, and I wanted to make the TPA board members aware of that. And lastly, 1194, Senate Bill 1194 is a lot of content. It's various transportation provisions, but one that sticks out to me as managed lanes are under construction and near operation in southern Palm Beach County was a modification to the use of any excess toll revenues generated by managed lanes facilities. It allows now for those excess toll revenues to be used for public transportation transit projects. Previously, that was already true within the project itself. So what happened in I-95 and Miami-Dade was toll revenues were able to be invested in the operation of a transit service that could run on the I-95 corridor. The change to the language in this bill allows it to be used on transit projects that parallel the managed lanes facilities as well. So very important for us as Boca Raton, Delray Beach, Southern Palm Beach County see the introduction of managed lanes, and our transit initiatives and discussion are looking for funding resources. We'll be monitoring that closely as we watch how it plays out in Broward and Miami-Dade. Several people have already mentioned the two workshops that were conducted just between the last board meeting and this, the CEFTEC workshop. The link to the video for that workshop is in the report, as well as the TPA's workshop on the future of public transit is, again, the video link is provided in the report. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention, we were asked at the last meeting to investigate the potential and the steps needed to basically provide continuous pedestrian and bicycle facilities on the A1A along the coastal area in Palm Beach County. We have a decent sense of existing conditions. We are doing a very rigorous review of that information, as well as identifying what are the constraints that prevent pedestrian and bicycle facilities from being there today, and how do we address and overcome those constraints. We're going to work with DOT on several upcoming resurfacing projects along the A1A to try to incorporate those ped bike facilities at the direction of the board. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. And Mr. Chair, I'm going to stop there. That concludes my verbal remarks.
Okay. Anyone have any questions, anything reported?
Mr. Chair,
Right.
thank you. Nick, one thing you left off, and it was a bill that I was watching, which was HB 839, which has now preempted the cities from making regulations with respect to EV chargers, including them as far as building codes. And I found that to be somewhat disturbing, given the fact that we're moving in that direction. And certainly even on a national level, I think that there's a emphasis on going electric so that we can meet our goals with the Paris Accord. So it was, I haven't seen if the governor has signed it yet. I'm assuming he will, but that's going to pretty much take the counties and the cities out of the ability to have gas stations, have chargers, or even to have generators in their stations should we have a hurricane and lose power. So again, home rule seems to have gone to hell again.
Let me see if I got this straight, because I was reading about this bill. You're saying that it would also prohibit local counties or cities from requiring gas stations to have backup power for hurricanes?
The way I'm reading it, and I'll let Commissioner McKinley, who's usually much more focused on state legislation than I am, but it appears that we have just been pushed out of the regulation of those areas.
Yeah, that came out of Hillsborough County and the city of Tampa. The city of Tampa's commission had been asked to consider a resolution basically eliminating fossil fuels in the city limits. And needless to say, industry freaked out a little bit about that. And this legislation.
This is a reaction?
This is a
Okay.
reactionary piece of legislation. Hopefully the governor doesn't sign it. It's a bit egregious, but that's the history behind it. You know, they're watching what you even look at. They didn't even consider, I mean, they didn't consider it, they didn't pass it or anything like that. They were just asked to take a look at it, and that scared industry enough. And the result is this bill.
Interesting. Anyone else had a comment on that? I don't know. We've been having conversations in our village about the future of petroleum utilization. And I think it's very apparent. It's in front of us, and it's happening probably sooner than we anticipate, that the public is going to shift to options where they want vehicles that are electric driven and not petroleum. So I certainly envision the petroleum lobby to probably want to do something to retard that transition. And we need to be vigilant on that, because what we need to focus on is how to help our citizens engage in their decision-making of going with electric vehicles. The infrastructure has to be there for them to do that. And the other point of information is we've done some research, and I think FPL absolutely plans on being in what we would call the retail level of this business of providing electric power for electric vehicles. And I think collectively at a county level and at the city level, we need to understand how that dynamic is going to work and how we can make it work for the benefit of our citizens and not to their detriment. So this is an issue that's upon us, and I think we just need to all keep an eye on what's happening on in this space. So thank you. And thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions on Nick's report? Seeing none, then we'll move to the next item.
Motion to approve the consent
We
agenda.
had a motion to approve the consent agenda. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no opposed. Okay, Margie, please let the record show that the consent agenda was approved unanimously. Okay, action items. Item 2A. Here we're looking for, I don't know what's coming out of my voice. Please forgive me. Here we're looking for an interlocal agreement between the Palm Beach TPA and Palm Beach County for the disposition of TPA fund balance and to authorize execution by the chair. The attached interlocal agreement between Palm Beach TPA and Palm Beach County compels the county to disperse $100,000 to the TPA and to retain the remaining $320,086 to offset annual county operation and maintenance costs for the State Road 80 street lighting project in West Palm Beach County. So I look at this as good news in the scheme of things. And you want to add any detail to that, Nick?
For the benefit of the board that is unfamiliar, we were hosted by Palm Beach County for, 40 years through November of 2019. And then we separated out, it became a fully independent agency in the beginning of fiscal year 20 and moved out to this facility. And while we were hosted by Palm Beach County, we were expending county funds and then reimbursing, expending and reimbursing. Over that period of time, we had accumulated a balance in the TPA fund of around $420,000. The question became about, so what do we do with that money now that we're separated from the county? And this is the resolution of that question. And I think it really accentuates that it was a partnership before, and it's continuing to be a partnership between the TPA and the county. We are using these resources to implement one of the board's highest priority projects, a longstanding request to construct the State Road 80 streetlights in Western Palm Beach County. Again, as a reminder for that project, the TPA is funding the design and construction. It's about a $14 million project. And so we are going to be providing the funds for the design and construction of the streetlights. The DOT is committing to reimburse the county for 90% of the operations and maintenance costs associated with those streetlights, pursuant to a typical relationship between the state and local government that operates streetlights on state roads. And the county is going to be paying the remaining 10% out of their own pockets. These funds offset the costs associated with that remaining 10% O&M cost for the streetlights, and it makes it a more palatable obligation for the county to accept going forward. And then they discharge the remainder of the funds to the TPA, and that would go into the TPA's reserve account now that we're again an independent agency. So I think this is a fantastic way to disperse the balance, and it does highlight the partnership between the county, the DOT, and the TPA in getting those streetlights done.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pretty sure I heard Mayor Wilson make that motion, so I will second that.
Yes, yes.
I heard him making that motion.
Thank you so much.
Mayor Wilson made the motion. I'll second the motion.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask if Mayor Wilson was still out there.
I heard him.
I just want to say before we move forward on this item that this project, this is happening. All right. And it's been long overdue. I'm glad to see that we're moving forward with it. Before I take the vote, though, I would like to ask Margie, do we have anyone out there with public comments?
No public comments, but you do have some tent cards raised. And I believe Mayor Wilson has a comment as well.
You said we had public
Yes.
comment cards?
You have tent cards. Yes,
Oh,
your
so-
board
oh,
members.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Mayor Wilson, why don't you go first?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, Nick, and to the Board of County Commissioners and the TPA board members. Thank you all for understanding the need of this project. If I had a cry, I would say I would hope that maybe the year 2026. So Nick, my question to you, is that when the construction starts, if we get the blessing of FDOT, or the completion of the construction? But again, thank you all. I'm not being sarcastic with that question, but I just want to know, will it be the year 2026 when we start, or the completion of the construction for that street lighting?
For the benefit of the board, the funding, you'll see this actually in the draft tip is on our agenda later this morning. The funding for the construction is in fiscal year 26, which would allow construction to commence as early as July of 2025. I know that's still several years later than we would like it to be built. And I want to remind the board that I am working aggressively with the DOT to potentially accelerate the design and construction. I think we have the resources. We need to work out the delivery of basically roles and responsibilities, the delivery of the design and the construction. We're going to try to work that out between the county, the DOT, and FPL. So we're doing all that we can to accelerate that project, but it would be constructed commencing as early as July of 25 in the current funding program.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is a companion to an action that the county commission took on Tuesday. We unanimously approved this, and certainly, you know, we have watched Mayor Wilson for years and years since he was a young boy trying to get this move forward. And I'm proud to finally be able to tell him that we probably are going in the right direction. I also wanted to give a shout out to Todd Von Laren, our assistant county administrator, who negotiated this agreement to reconcile the accounts of the TPA with the county, and also to, and here comes the assistant county administrator as I speak about him. Certainly
timing.
to
How
be
you
able
guys-
to reconcile that account and have the accounts straightened out, and also take care of Mayor Wilson's request is really a great thing. And I would have thirded the motion if I
motion.
could.
Okay. Commissioner?
Thank you. I think this was the first discussion when I sat here my first time in 2017, and Mayor Wilson was so passionate about the lights. And I just want to say, Mayor Wilson, keep your fingers crossed it gets done as early as 2025. And you have no greater proponents than the people that are sitting in this room, including County Commissioner Melissa McKinley, who represents your district. So we know what safety is. We know how important it is to everyone. And when Secretary Thibault always says the most important thing to him is safety, this really follows that. Thank you.
Any other comments? If there are none, then we have a motion and a second. Margie, can you take the vote?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the motion on the floor is to approve an interlocal agreement between the Palm Beach TPA and Palm Beach County for disposition of the TPA fund balance, and to authorize execution by the TPA chair. Before I call the roll, virtual members, please unmute your microphones. In-person members, please remember to turn on your microphones. Please respond by saying either yes or no when I call your name. Steve Wilson,
Yes.
Yvette Drucker,
Yes.
Andy Thompson,
Yes.
Stephen Grant,
Yes.
Shelley Petrolia,
Yes.
Joel Flores,
Yes.
Jim Krebsky,
Yes.
Christopher McVoy,
Yes.
Joni Brinkman,
Yes.
Catherine Waldron, shall be marked absent, Chelsea Reed,
Yes.
Melissa McKinley,
Hell, yes.
Maria Moreno,
I'll second Melissa's hell yes.
Maria Sachs,
Yes.
Greg Weiss,
Yes.
Douglas Lawson, he'll be marked as absent, Michael Napoleon,
Yes.
Christina Lambert,
Yes.
Joseph Paduzzi, he will be marked as absent, Robert Weinroth,
Yes, finally.
Fred Pinto.
Absolutely, yes.
It passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Mr. Chair,
I'm sorry.
yes. One last comment, Mr. Chair, and I'm gonna be leaving. I want to say this to all of you. I want to sing a little song. You are so beautiful. Thank you, Melissa McKinley, and all the board members. Thank you all so much. The folks in the Glades community, I'm telling you, they're happy about this progress, but more importantly, that you guys decided to make this happen. So I'm saying, you are so beautiful to me.
You know this is being
Thank
recorded,
you.
right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Wilson, for your comments. All right, moving forward, item 3A is we're on informational items, and we're going to get a federal update. We have TPA consultants who provide an update regarding surface transportation reauthorization for fiscal years 2022 to 2026 as part of our fiscal year 2022 appropriations. These are member designated projects and community project funding and federal transportation funding opportunities. We're going to be hearing from Lori Hedinger and Lisa Bogovic. These are consultants from Holland and Knight working with the TPA staff. So you're on.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having Lisa and I here today. We're really excited to work with y'all. We're going to give quick introductions of ourselves and then give some updates on the Surface Transportation Authorization Bill, the fiscal year 2022 appropriations bill, the infrastructure bill, fingers crossed, and then also the earmarks, otherwise known as community project funding requests made by your delegation members. First, we both work at Holland and Knight. It's a law firm based in Florida and created in Florida, and it continues to be based in Tampa with 5 other offices in Florida, including one in West Palm Beach. Our lobbying practice is based in DC. There are over 100 people in addition to Lisa and me there, including several former members of Congress, including Ron Klain, who did represent part of your area, and also former Governor Martinez. And one reason why I think both Lisa and I joined Holland and Knight is as bipartisan. So regardless who controls the House or the Senate or the administration, there's always someone or many people who have relationships with congressional leadership, the committee chairs, the White House, and the federal agencies, including DOT. So my name is Lori Hedinger. I'm a senior policy advisor at Holland and Knight. I've been there about 8 years. I work with a number of MPOs, transportation agencies, municipalities, and then several ports and also water utilities. Before joining Holland and Knight, I worked in the Senate for several Republican senators for about 10 years. And my last job before joining Holland and Knight was I was the staff director of the Senate Environment, Public Works, Highways and Infrastructure Subcommittee. And this is a subcommittee in charge of drafting the surface transportation bill. So I had the opportunity to work on Safety Lou and MAP 21 and also the FAST Act. So thank you so much for having us today. Lisa?
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Barkovic. I have been at Holland and Knight now for 16 years as a senior policy advisor. And prior to joining Holland and Knight, I worked for former Congressman Mark Foley. So I know Palm Beach County, maybe have met some of you when I worked for him during 2000 to 2005. And looking forward to getting to know you. My practice area is representing local governments and transportation authorities like Palm Beach TPA. So next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Lori so we can kind of get into the meat of our presentation here.
Hi. So starting with surface transportation, as you probably know, every 5 to 6 years, Congress considers the surface transportation bill. And this sets both policy and funding levels for all Department of Transportation programs. And that includes federal highways, federal transit, and federal railroad. The current bill, the FAST Act, expires on September 30th of this year. Last year, the House was able to pass its version, but the Senate was not able to complete its version and passed out the Senate. So this year, both House and Senate and Republicans and Democrats have really prioritized getting this bill done. The Senate Environment Public Works Committee, which oversees highways, is taking the lead on the Senate side. They have been drafting its bill since March. Lisa and I have been in regular contact with them to get updates and also better understand their priorities. And they're working on a bipartisan basis. We're hearing from the staff that they're hoping to complete their draft and pass it out to committee before the Memorial Day recess. On the House side, the committee in charge is called Transportation Infrastructure, and they have also been working diligently on its draft. On that side, the Democrats are taking the lead, and Republicans are working on another bill. The committee has allowed members to request earmarks, and the reauthorization bill they're known as member designated projects. The committee originally wanted to issue its draft this week and pass it next week. However, it's taken the staff quite a bit of time to review the almost 2,400 requests they got from members. So we're now hearing that the committee markup could be around June 9th. And Lisa's going to go into a few more details about that. But just right quick, some overall priorities that have been in the previous House and Senate bills that I think very much work for your federal priority is that they have increased the set aside for MPOs under the Transportation Alternatives Program. They've increased it by population and also increased it by percentage, both in the House and Senate bills. In the Senate, they include a new resiliency title, and that includes more money for electric vehicles and also more money for MPOs and states to apply for resiliency infrastructure as a competitive grant program. On the House side, they create a new over $6 billion formula program out of the Highway Trust Fund to help MPOs fund resiliency and emergency evacuation needs. So I thought this would be very helpful, especially to you and the other MPOs in Florida. And then, like I said before, they increase their set aside for TAP and also the increase of sub-allocations too from population. Lisa, and next slide.
So real quick before we kind of get into the discussion of what did the Palm Beach County delegation submit for requests, I wanted to kind of talk about how there are two different pipelines for requests. So there is the surface transportation reauthorization pipeline that Lori talked about, had mentioned the member designated projects. So you're going to see that requests got, the majority of transportation requests got submitted in this pipeline. And these are for projects that get funded over 5 years. So if you were to see the Palm Tran request, right, when if it would get put into the legislation, you're going to see that if it received $4 million, you know, that $4 million is going to be kind of evenly divided amongst those 5 fiscal years. And so you have a bigger chunks of money that are put towards projects. Members of Congress on the House side are going to be given somewhere between $15 to $20 million to allocate amongst the projects they submitted. And then the other pipeline is the annual appropriations bills. These are that typically move in 12 individual appropriation bills, but at the end of the day, we typically see that big omnibus bill that you hear about. And so these requests are being called community project funding requests. They're much smaller and they have a smaller time frame and when they need to the funding needs to be used. So 1 to 2 years to use the funding. Next slide. So Congresswoman Frankel, all the transportation projects that she received, she put only into the surface transportation authorization pipeline as member designated projects. And you can see these are the projects that she submitted and her total dollar amount. And again, I'm pointing this out because this is important, is just comes under that $20 million approximate amount of funding that we are expecting members to be given. If it ends up being $15 million, obviously she will have to make some edits to how that money will then be divided amongst the projects she submitted. Next slide. Congressman Deutsch, obviously he submitted one project through the appropriations process, and then the rest were for the surface transportation. And then you can see here, you know, obviously he has submitted the Palm Tran request that we were excited to see. Next slide. And then Congressman Mast, obviously he submitted 2 projects for surface transportation totaling 20 million in St. Lucie. He did not, and I wanted to make this, he did not submit any projects through the community project funding process. This is something that is not unusual for Republicans. Republicans were trying to, a lot of different House Republicans took different strategies on this. Some said they weren't going to submit at all on surface transportation authorization and just through annual appropriations. But I think Congressman Mast took a different approach because he is a member of the T&I committee. Next slide. Oh, and real quick before I turn this back over to Lori to start talking about the infrastructure package, just one thing to note, the Senate is not doing projects within the surface transportation authorization bill and an appropriation. So we are not going to have that opportunity with the senators. And then obviously with the unfortunate passing of Congressman Hastings, no projects could be submitted for that district. Lori.
One more addition, and you know, in Congress, things could change at 9:58, but we're hearing that the appropriation subcommittees are going to start marking up their bills next month. And so we'll be at that time, we'll start seeing the bills and then which requests made it in, of course, as a committee works it out with the members. Infrastructure. I know we've been talking about this for a long time, and believe it or not, there is another infrastructure week, the week of June 7th, but it really does look like it's feasible right now. Just a quick overview, because I know you probably have also been reading about this in the press. On the end of March, the president introduced his infrastructure framework, which is called the American Jobs Plan. And it included $2 trillion over 8 years for infrastructure. His plan included traditional infrastructure, such as roads, bridges, transit, ports, but also included what some think is non-traditional: resiliency, climate, broadband, housing. And he also is requesting to pay for it by a corporate tax hike over 15 years, which of course Republicans at this point are not supporting. But just a few more details is $621 billion for roads and bridges. And he emphasizes that this is to repair and maintain versus creating new capacity. $85 billion to update and modernize transit. Then also he includes, he requests to establish a new grant and incentive program for both state and local governments and the private sector. As you know, after that, in his State of the Union, he also unveiled his, what he calls human infrastructure plan, and that's called the American Families Plan, and that's a $1.8 trillion package. Well, meanwhile, on April 22nd, the Senate Republicans unveiled their infrastructure counterproposal, and it was $568 billion over 5 years versus 8. And they focused on the traditional infrastructure: roads, bridges, transit, rail, and water, along with ports and airports. Both of these were very high-level frameworks, but the Republicans pointed out, rather than creating new programs, they want this funding to flow through existing Department of Transportation formula programs and also the discretionary competitive grant programs that have seemed to work. As I'm sure you saw in the press, the Senate Republicans, a group of moderates led by Senator Shelley Moore Capito, and she's important because she's a ranking member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, which is overseeing the highway bill. So she led a group of Republicans to meet with the president last week, and we're hearing the meeting went really well. There's going to have, from both sides, going to have to be compromises. $568 billion versus $2 trillion is a huge gap. And as I said before, the Democrats really want non-traditional infrastructure to be included too. But during the meeting, the president says he is willing to drop things from his American Jobs Plan if he can get a deal. And then perhaps they can get a bipartisan deal, pass this in Congress, and then include the controversial provisions from American Jobs Plan, American Families Plan, and a bill and consider that under reconciliation. And that is sort of an arcane budget process, but allows bills to be passed by a simple majority. Right now, the Republicans are supposed to come back with a counter offer. And in the meeting, apparently what we're hearing from our sources is they seem to be focused on around a $1 trillion amount. They're supposed to meet, I don't think they were supposed to meet originally this week, but I think it's been pushed off a little bit later. But it does, like, we're going to keep y'all apprised of how these discussions go. But right now, both Democrat and Republican staff do seem optimistic. Next slide.
So just real quick here, talking about federal grant opportunities and outlook. As you know, every administration, changes the Tiger. They originally started off as Tiger, then it was renamed the Build Grant Program under President Trump's administration, and now it's being renamed the BRAISE Grant Program. So the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity project submissions need to be done by July 12th. The other opportunity that's open now, and we're tracking all of the different grants that you all might be interested in, is the Transit-Oriented Development Planning Grant. This is a grant that gets submitted to the FTA to kind of look at, obviously, transit-oriented development projects like bus rapid transit or rail projects. Next slide. And then coming soon are the CRISI grants, the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements, as well as the Bus and Bus Facilities Grant Program. And so, again, as we can be helpful to you all in providing guidance, reviewing grant applications, and helping to edit, we are happy to do so. Next slide. That's it. Questions?
Chair. I have one question for our presenters and then one question for our executive director. First question for the presenters. The earmarks that would have been coming out of Florida's 23rd congressional district, are they being captured by other members, or are those lost?
Those are lost.
All right. Well, that was,
yeah. I actually had a conversation, during the last several months, actually, with Congressman Hastings. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz was helping to be the communicator between his office and with leadership, and they did try to see what they could do to be helpful from that perspective. But basically what happens is when an office is vacant, it just becomes a constituent services office that is managed by the chief administrator officer of the House.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Nick, we are obviously programming funds through our TIP and through long range planning, and there's a lot of money on the table with the American Jobs Plan. Specifically between 115 billion and 299 billion, depending on which bill or which end of that range is passed. So the question is, where does this money go? Does this flow into our planning, accelerating what we already have in our plan? Or is this going to be like the MCORs, which is sort of around us and a separate set of spending?
Mr. Chair, I would actually ask Lori and Lisa if they could give us some guidance on how that would potentially play out.
So as I mentioned before, this was a very high level framework. They did not even mention the types of programs this $68 billion for roads would go, or the money for transit would go. But we're assuming, these are big assumptions, we've not done a stimulus bill since 2009. Back then, they put the money through, for example, the STP program, the Surface Transportation Program, because it's a very flexible account that you and other localities across the country can use. But like I said before, we don't know which accounts they're going to use. We also don't know how quickly you'll have to spend the money. One reason why ARA was criticized afterwards, and I was on the Hill back then, because they said you had to use your transportation and water money within 18 months. So as you know, it's hard to build a bridge, it's hard to build a pipeline within 18 months. So what essentially, I don't know what the TPO did, but is a lot of my transportation agencies in Ohio where I worked, they were filling potholes, right? And they were maybe adjusting some sidewalks and putting up new street lights. It was really frustrating. And so the Obama administration got criticized for that, and they admitted, we wanted this to go to huge projects. They gave like Memorial Bridge an example in the DC, Virginia area, but you can't spend money that quickly. So I do know staff is talking about that to make sure you have larger obligation timelines to spend the money on projects you really need. So sorry, I don't have a lot of details. I'm hoping that we'll get more over the next month or so.
Thank you.
Does that clarify? It
Well,
didn't for me, but-
kind of, still a little muddy, but
Mr. Chair, I'll supplement. And just as a reminder for the board members that were not in an elected capacity when ARA was passed, that the selection of projects for that funding did go through the local MPOs. And so the county asked for some projects. I think Royal Palm got a project, Wellington got a project, but the opportunity for proposals, because it was quick trigger money, was you have to know what you're going to build and you have to be able to deliver it quickly. And as Lori said, it was a lot of maintenance projects.
It's the old shovel ready issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now it's called shovel worthy. That's what
Shovel-worthy.
Biden was.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
I guess part of the question though that I'm still not clear on, are these net new funds that we can supplement existing funding and reallocate that existing funding? Because I thought that was part of your question as well.
well, I think that is, certainly if we have shovel ready or whatever we're going to use the terminology and push those projects to the front of the line, take the federal money for that, and then reallocate the money we had already allocated for projects where in our pipeline, then, I mean, that would certainly make sense. But I guess that it puts a lot of pressure on us to continually look for those shovel ready or warranted projects so that we don't leave money on the table.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Lisa or Lori, if one of you could answer, back in January, the late Congressman Hastings filed a piece of legislation. It's HR 248, the Farm to Market Road Repair Act of 2021. Hold on a second there. It's legislation and language that my office has been working on with our federal partners for a number of years. Congressman Mast had rolled it into previous pieces of legislation, and Senator Rubio's office was pretty supportive as well. Congresswoman Frankel co-sponsored that bill in March, a few months later. Do we know if she's going to take over that bill for him since he passed, or is that legislation dead, or is it going to be rolled into perhaps as an amendment to the overall bill, the overall reauthorization?
That's a great question. I will check in with the Congresswoman's office. Typically what they do is they'll ask one of the co-sponsors to take over the lead sponsorship of that legislation. And so I'm sure that they're still working on, and obviously with Congressman Mast being on TNI, that's a helpful position to be on. So we can definitely check in with the staff and talk to them about what they're doing on the bill, and then we can get back to Nick and let him know so he can pass that on to you.
And I was just reviewing the summary of it, and Senator Shelley Moore Capito is from West Virginia, and she's a ranking member of the committee that oversees highways. So if they agree to, I think this would be an attractive provision to her and other members on the committee.
Okay, and I can have some of my National Association of Counties folks reach out to her office as well. And then
Good
I
idea.
just want to comment to the board, this is so frustrating. And while I appreciate, we have 4 members of Congress that represent Palm Beach County. And out of our 4, we do not have a single project aside from some bus shelters on the entire western side of Palm Beach County. And I can't even begin to tell you how irresponsible and insensitive to the constituents of Alcee Hastings Congressional District, the decision by Governor DeSantis to not hold this special election, the primary in November and a general election until January. This is the danger of doing that. That entire district now has no projects being considered in a 5-year reauthorization. And not only did he represent Belglade, South Bay, Pahokee, and the rest of the unincorporated area of the Glades, his district swings down into Royal Palm Beach, parts of West Palm Beach, Riviera Beach, as well as the parts of Broward County. And that entire region for 5 years will not have a project listed in this reauthorization because the governor decided to wait nearly a year to fill that spot. Unbelievably irresponsible and the worst kind of, as Steve Abrams used to call it, pothole politics I've ever seen. Thank you.
And thank you for that reality, unfortunate reality. You have anything you want to do? Okay. Any other questions for our presenters? If not, thank you so much for your presentation and update.
Thank you.
And we'll continue to march, right?
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully one day we'll go meet you in person.
Yeah.
All right, now we're going to move to agenda item 3. Well, it's now the 3B, previously known as 3C, which is a review of pedestrian and bicycle facilities for January through March. The board was directed staff to present a map of fatal pedestrian and bicycle crashes and on a quarterly basis, and this is fulfillment of that requirement. So we're going to get an update from staff on this. Andrew, you're her. I don't know if I always mess up your name, right? I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll pronounce it again.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Euler, Deputy Director of Program Development. Good to see you all this morning. So I'll be going through the draft review of pedestrian bicycle fatalities for January to March 2021. So this is a map and a form, a template that we have for one crash for you all to review. And what we're really looking for as a request from you all is just how we can refine this form to be better and easily understood, not just for those focused in this field, engineers and planners, but also for you all, for the general public, to really get something out of this and be effective. To restate our vision, a safe, efficient, and connected multimodal transportation system. So safety being the first goal in our vision statement, and we try to incorporate safety in all of our planning activities here at the TPA. So that goes to the TPA prioritization of TPA funding, our review of other FDOT and local projects, and then also how we draft policy considerations. So why quarterly reviews of pedestrian and bicycle fatalities? Well, the TPA, you all, adopted Vision Zero commitment originally in 2018. And that's a commitment to 0 fatalities and serious injuries on our roadway network here in Palm Beach County. You all renewed that commitment of Vision Zero in February of 2021. And a lot of that discussion at that meeting in February revolved around our most vulnerable users. So our pedestrian and bicycle fatalities, our crashes there. And although they make up around 2% of the mode split, trips on the network, they're disproportionately impacted by fatalities. So 27% of the total fatalities are pedestrian bicycle related. And we're just showing a quick graph there on the right that shows the traffic related fatalities in Palm Beach County over the past 5 years. You can see all fatalities and then pedestrian bicycle fatalities. And lastly, although this quarter review is a great way to remind us all quarterly about the importance, the urgency that Vision Zero has for our community, this also helps us reveal trends and high impact countermeasures that we can begin adopting. So what's in the quarterly review? It does include a map of fatal pedestrian bicycle crashes in the quarter. So what you see here on the right is a map of 19 total fatalities, pedestrian bicycle fatalities from January to March that was in the system. And that's gonna be a static map that we provide in the backups to our committees and to you all on the board. And then we also have this data on our interactive map that's pulling from FDOT at palmbeachtpa.org/map. And then when you go on that map, you can actually click on those crashes and get more details involved in each crash. The second part of this report would be one-page summaries of each crash. And so for what we have you today is a sample template with one crash in our community recently that involved a fatality. And so what this one-page summary is really compilation of the police report, which right now it's 3 pages. It includes sensitive information that can't be released to the public. So we take information that is relevant and try to make it into a concise summary at the top of the form. And then we provide a crash diagram, and then our staff observations, which we would then also seek input from law enforcement, signal maintaining agencies, and roadway owners. And then we provide potential actions for this specific crash. So I'm just going to show you a breakdown and zoom in of the form. So the top is really just general information on the crash. So location, date, weather, lighting, roadway surface, time of day, and then the harmful event. And so in this instance, we have a location for you is Indiantown Road at Loxahatchee Drive that occurred recently in March at 7:14 p.m. And then the bottom part is individual information about those involved. So in this specific crash, there was a driver who was heading westbound on Indiantown Road who ran a red light. And then we had 2 bicyclists involved in this crash who were heading southbound in the crosswalk. And in this bottom information, there's other information about those individuals with the age, their condition, if vision was impaired in any way, distracted drugs or alcohol, and then the severity of the fatality or serious injury. In this case, we had a bicyclist who was killed, and then also the other bicyclist who was seriously injured.
Just a question. I had this, I think I asked this before. It says the weather was clear, but the road surface was wet. Is that a result of external watering or a brief shower, or we don't know?
I don't believe if it's going to be showing weather clear and road surface wet, it might be because of that, but unless it's provided in the report, we wouldn't know.
We wouldn't know. Okay. Thank you.
Sometimes the officers do give a write-out, more detailed description, and so we can always look through that and find out more information and add it to this reform. That's a good observation there.
Just another question, just to understand this, the underage, why do they use brackets as opposed to actual age? Is because they don't know, or?
No, we actually put the brackets in there. We have the ages available, and I believe we can put the ages specifically if you'd like to show that instead. That's not something that's a sensitive information.
It's not, okay. All right, thanks. Another question? Great.
It says it's in daylight at 7:14 p.m. in March 22nd.
Yes, so this was actually occurring near sunset.
That's kind of misleading, huh?
Yeah, I wouldn't think it was daylight.
And those are good observations where
They could say it was light, I guess. I don't know, but
I'll tell you, as someone who has to drive west on their way home at 7:15.
it's tough.
Bright, yeah.
You got that sun right in your eyes. Absolutely. Yeah.
The time change was March 8th, 10th.
Andy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andrew, I appreciate the presentation. You had mentioned the map function on the Palm Beach TPA website and how to access. I thought you meant that like the quarterly fatalities listed in the quarterly report. Could you just tell me again how to access that?
Sure, yes. If you go to palmbeachtpa.org/map, you'll see a layer on there that's called all fatal and serious injury crashes. There's a lot of data on there. So when you zoom in, we don't have it filtered right now, and it's pulling directly from FDOT. We're working right now on our Vision Zero update actually to clean it up a little bit more, to make it more useful. But all the crashes are on there, fatal and serious injury crashes.
Is that for the quarter, for the year?
That's anything in the database. So that's going to be.
It's cumulative, I think.
It's cumulative.
Year to date cumulative.
7 years.
Right, because I triggered that layer and it was a lot of crashes. I was like, that doesn't look like the quarter. Is there a way to parse out just this quarter?
Yep, that's good.
So that's, you would have to set that up as a different tab option.
We could do that, or we could filter that specific one. But we can do that, yes.
Okay, I don't know, it would seem to be useful to give anyone who's, you know, a board member who's going through this information, to give them the option of seeing it in some different time intervals. I don't know how doable that is, but that would make it more useful. That way, a board member could kind of zone in, especially if it's in an area within their you know, their jurisdiction, their city limits or something to that effect. Give them the ability to see timeframes and different variables, you know, number of accidents in different timeframes. That makes sense for you, Andy?
Definitely, yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Can we go back to that bar graph you showed of the incidence of fatalities? Yeah, okay. I mean, I look at this and it really makes a mockery of Vision Zero. And as our letter to the secretary says, when we're going to get to 4A1, being ranked 13th most dangerous for pedestrians certainly is not something to be excited about, and demonstrating any kind of control over this. And if you look at those numbers and recognize the fact that in 2020, a lot of people stayed home and the numbers still went up, we have a disaster on our hands, and we have to figure out, other than wringing our hands over these statistics, what we can do to keep people from being killed on the roadways. And that's what it comes down to. It's just, we are building and designing roadways that are killing people. And we have to figure out how to change that. And if complete streets is the answer, then we have to embrace that as a way of making roads more pedestrian safe. Forget about friendly, safe. The reports that you gave on this individual accident, I think are good. I'd like to see it for all 20 of the fatalities. I'd like to see us look at that data a little bit more critically. Obviously at 7:15, it wasn't light. It may have been, you know, dusk. If it was a clear day, then why was the roadway wet? I mean, I think we need to have a little more here. And I think this body needs to come to grips with the fact that what we're doing is not working. You take a look from 2016 to 2020, nothing has changed. And if you take a look at 2020, where probably half the people were staying home, working virtually, not going to school, not leaving their homes because of the pandemic, that means that that number is much higher if we take it by the number of people that were on the road at that point in time. So this is a disaster. And to look at it anything other than that, and to be able to continually say we endorse Vision Zero is a joke. So we have to do something. Thank you.
I think it's appropriate for me to share a perspective on this one, since this is the area that I serve. You know, a few months ago when we took some action and we amended it, saying that each local municipality had to be a participant in this in order to reasonably ever think you could ever get to zero. So I just want to share a perspective as I look at this, and I think this is phenomenal, this process. And I was having some conversation with Nick before the meeting that, and I'm not trying to stir up debate. I'm just sharing as a representative for Jupiter that feels accountable. And I want to preface it by saying that I have no interest in assigning blame. It's tragic because this implies the blame was the driver, but you know, nonetheless, you know, a person was killed. So it's really tragic. And this is where I think the local municipalities play a role, is the potential actions, you know, go to things that, you know, changing infrastructure and maybe more penalties on distracted driving, you know, if that was the case. But what the first thing that occurred to me when I heard about this is we've done a lot in public education, because we've had fatalities where people were crossing at mid crossing. So the first thing I was very encouraged, wow, maybe our, our education efforts have improved because they're crossing at a crosswalk. But then, but that, in that case, that didn't help. And what does occur to me, and the example I used with with Nick earlier was, what would I try to teach my kids about this, that maybe they could have helped themselves? And people in the town are my kids, right? I'm an elected official. I serve them. And so I'm going to go back and check on our education program to just make sure. We may have been so focused on cross to a crosswalk and you're safe. Maybe we have not emphasized enough, look, because you know what, I'm out there observing all the time, and yes, pedestrian bicycles have right of way. But just like many years ago when I drove a motorcycle, you have to expect that they're going to miss you. And, so as we teach defensive driving, whatever, maybe there's an education piece to this. And I just wanted to share, that's the role that the town in it'd be an easy thing to make sure we're now emphasizing that point. Maybe a life could have been saved. So I do think we've made progress to the degree that this fatality happened in a crosswalk, which again, I'm observing more and more as I drive around. There's been a lot of improvements being made when you get into the crosswalk, but still everybody has to be defensive about it. So just wanted to share that perspective. That's why this is so meaningful to me, to see it kind of shows where it is and whatever. So thank you. It enables me to do my job better.
Steve.
So I want to thank everyone for allowing us to have this information before we see the draft tip, because part of that tip is making sure that we are working with the state and the county to make sure that the roads are safer in the next 5 years, rather than seeing what else has happened. I'm going to have to agree to disagree where it's not education, it's culture. We have had a culture of vehicles first for as long as I've been alive. And that's what needs to change. It's simple things that we can say, that a person that hits a call button to walk across the road has priority more so than a vehicle, because currently they do not have more priority. They have to wait in the sun, in the rain, whatever the weather is, until the cycle goes through that allows them to do that. We have the technology, we have the ability to give them the priority. And that's where I'm at, is that when Secretary O'Reilly came here, I asked the question, how many deaths do we have between pedestrians and bicyclists? He says, well, there's no information on that. And I said, well, does that mean there's none? He says, well, I can't say that, but there's no information. And so that's the big push that we need to have for Complete Streets. It's keeping the bikes, if the speed limit is more than 35 miles per hour, off the roads, because of the likelihood of death is so great. What is the speed on Indiantown Road? So that person
It's pretty fast.
could have been speeding through that red light. We don't have that information, do we? And it's something that it's very scary for me, with a young child, to say, even if you do everything right, there's going to be someone who in a car that has a culture of running red lights. And, that's why in the city of Boynton Beach, we have the red light cameras, and we really don't see we still see them because we have a lot of people driving through our city, but it's changing the culture through the consequence of a $158 ticket. And so it's something that we need to work together so that we have that culture of putting bicyclists and pedestrians first. And there's simple changes through technology that we can do, and there's simple changes through design. However, it's not going to happen tomorrow. And the hope is that the future, we have the Vision Zero. That's why it's not zero now. It's Vision Zero for the future, because I think we had a month or two without a fatality in the city, and that's good. Some years we had it January 1st that we had a fatality. And so it's that education culture of putting bicyclists, pedestrians first, because this crash report does not include all of the over 150, or go by quarterly, at least 40 vehicle deaths that we had on our roads on average. So this is something that if we make it safer for people to walk and bike, we will have less people in their cars. Because what we have learned in 2020, when the ridership of vehicles went down, the deaths of people went up. That means it was dangerous by design. And that's where we have to review everything that we had, because the fact is that our roads are not safe. And we didn't know what we know now. With less vehicles, there would be more deaths. So thank you again for the information. I do think we need to include the ages so that it gives it a better understanding. If we could do what I would like as part of the summary, the youngest, the oldest, and the median. So we get so that they see that, hey, you know, we're having someone who's 70 or so, someone who's 5, and that way we understand who's on our roads. Because with this just one example, it was young adults who, you know, have grown up doing something like this all the time, and you know, they had caught in the wrong place at the wrong time with someone running a red light. And so I would encourage Jupiter to look into red light cameras to help change the culture.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chelsea.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to the TPA staff for putting this together at the request of the board. There's nothing more chilling than reading about somebody being killed on one of our street corners. So I would encourage us to, with the TPA staff, if you have the resources to do so, don't give us brevity. This is someone's life. Tell us the story. It can be more than one page. And I think it's important that if we're going to take this seriously and we're going to do quarterly reports, we need the full story. And then we as a board need to pay attention to the last part of it the most, which are the potential actions. Because you're giving us the story and you're giving us the solutions. And it's extraordinarily straightforward. So I would encourage you to flesh out the information as much as possible so that we can help make informed decisions for each of our municipalities or our county. And yeah, this is just, I'm like chilling. It makes Vision Zero more important to me.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I couldn't see the signs.
Good morning, everyone. As we were doing a presentation, one of the things that came to mind is a conversation that I had with a mother about a month and a half ago who lost her 18-year-old, who had just recently bought a moped and was so excited that he was going to be able to go to work in the moped. As you can hear it in my voice, it's something that it's personal. That conversation was definitely not easy. And how do you explain to a mother that we could have done better? My 17-year-old daughter recently just got her vehicle, and I tried to put the fear of God into her about the responsibility that she has when she gets behind that vehicle, how she has to look everywhere, how she has to check her mirrors, how she has to do everything. So this is a personal subject. I think it's a subject that I see consensus on everyone's faces right now. I think everything that has been said previously to me I think we all agree. I think it's all about culture. I think it's all about education, and then coming up with a unified approach to solving an issue that we've identified. We brought this forward because we want quarterly reports because we know it's an issue. The chart that we just saw, nothing has changed. So what are we going to do? Are we just going to talk about it? Are we just going to look at quarterly reports? You know, I look at this board and what you guys did with the street lighting on Southern it's the perfect example of what we should be doing with this particular issue and how we keep people safe on our roads. I would like to see trends. What are some of the trends that are happening? Cell phones, is it drinking? Is it lighting? So all of this information, but just collecting information and then put it in front of us does nothing. I think we need to figure out how we come up with a unified approach to this so that it's not one municipality or it's the county or or who do we have to hold accountable to make the changes that we need on our roads? So thank you for the report, but I would like to take it a step further, and I want to, whether we have to have workshops and start opening discussion about different roads, or how do we keep those, how do we start investing? Because we have a huge list of funding that's coming before us over the next 5 years, but what are the steps that we're going to implement in all of these projects that are going to keep our pedestrians, our cyclists, and everyone in the road safe? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the comments that came before. To me, looking at that graph is very sobering. I love the idea of Vision Zero, but obviously in whatever that was, 5-6 years of data, we're not moving the needle. And for me too, it's, although I have not been in Mayor Flores's position, fortunately so far, but as a longtime Palm Beach County bicyclist, transportation bicyclist, not recreational, and coming from a community that has a lot of, you know, I don't know what the right word is, but obligatory bicyclists. I can't agree more with the frustration expressed by Commissioner Weinroth and the comment from Mayor Grant that we're not there. I love the reports. I love the data. I do think there's some things that can be added, a little bit more detail that have been alluded to, give some more information to try to help people understand, you know, and I don't envy the people who have to prepare these reports. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's important, at least we owe it to those people to do this and then act on it. I'm both a car driver and a bicyclist, and it's easy to forget when you're in a car that you've got a lot of steel around you. Bicycle, you're only got steel that you're sitting on. That's the best you got. And the vulnerability, and if we're committed as a society to trying to have more multimodal transportation, bicycling, walking, the biggest obstacle to biking is people feeling safe in this county. This does not feel like a county where, or even that I, as a bicyclist, very committed to it, can encourage other people, yeah, get out on your bike to work instead of driving. We have a long way to go in terms of action on changing that culture, changing the balance of resources that go to promoting car driving versus promoting other safer modes. As Mayor Grant points out, I don't think, although there are cases of bicyclists killing pedestrians, it's pretty rare, and probably not too many the other way. But let's do work on this. Let's do push hard for concrete action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I'm Maria Sachs from Palm Beach County Commission. I think that it is pretty obvious here that there is a problem. We hear from the cities, we hear from the county, and we also see from the federal transportation budget that there are funds available to work on our highways. I would suggest this. I am really frustrated with hearing about problems and fatalities and these crashes that occur on our highways. I would love to change the culture, but we are a nation made of motor vehicles. It's not Denmark. However, I think what we need to do is we need to address the problem as we know best. And I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, if we could possibly have a advisory board or a task force or something to bring together those folks from our cities, the county, and also someone from the federal legislative delegation to discuss how best to resolve this issue. We can talk about the fatalities. We can talk about how we need to change. However, it is what it is. We need to come up with 21st century resolutions, changes. Maybe I have always said, and I've filed many bills in the legislature that what we need is a separate bicycle path that is protected by rails between vehicles and pedestrians and bicyclists. But that takes money. I think there is money in the federal budget, but I think what we need to do is come together in a concerted voice. So I would suggest that you consider putting together a task force to review the possible changes that we can make in our cities and our county roads so that we get to that almost zero for fatalities. Thank you.
Would you be willing to serve on that task force?
My dad would always say, never volunteer. I think he was in the army, but I will do whatever I can to help out because I've raised this issue about getting raise money from the federal government. And I think we've come to the point where we're all of us here feel this frustration. So let's see what we can do to get those issues resolved. Thank you.
I've been here for a while. I was here when I was on the city council. And I know I came back to Nick at one point after I came back from a trip to Israel, which is notorious for mowing down its residents. You're probably much more likely to get hit by a car than by a bullet. But the fact is that they have figured out how to protect their bicyclists by having an intermediate level of pavement for the bicyclists. And as I was walking along the Tel Aviv sidewalk there, I saw that you had the pavement for the motor vehicles and slightly higher was the pavement for the bicycles. And then higher than that was for pedestrians. And I came back with that idea for Nick and he said it was unworkable. And I'm not going to accept that. I'm not going to accept the fact that we cannot engineer a way for our bicyclists and pedestrians to be safer. And it's not lost on me that during Nick's remarks today, item 8, National Bicycle Month. How can we in good conscience tell our residents, get out there and bicycle because it's healthy for you as long as you're not killed? I mean, really, this is just so frustrating. And I saw Valerie has a tweet up today where she's talking about how healthy it is to get out there and bicycle. And we all know we live in a beautiful place in the world. Sunshine is why we're here and we want to enjoy it. But we got to stop killing our residents and we have to figure out a way. Education, absolutely. But like has been pointed out, these pedestrians, these bicyclists in this one situation did the right thing. They were in the crosswalk and they got killed. So it's just, something's got to be done. And I'm tired of wringing my hands over the fact that the numbers are there and we can't do anything to change it. We're not changing the dynamics. We're not changing the slope. In fact, it's going in the wrong direction. So whatever needs to be done, whether it's a workshop, whether it's just to step back and figure out what needs to be done as far as engineering new roads going forward or retrofitting roads going forward, we have to do something. It just is not acceptable to continually look at these numbers and say, damn, it's still going up. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Real
I-
quick, so
Jody?
we have an opportunity. So we just started the beginning of the meeting with the Prosperity Farms extension that was approved by the county commissioners, which was approved by the TPA for funding beforehand. Right now, if you look at the way it's set up, they have already repaved just recently from PGA Boulevard to Hood Road was recently repaved. Now it's set to be paved from Hood Road to Donald Ross, not the bike lanes yet because of the way the funding is working out. So now we're going to go back and spend more money and redo it again so that on Prosperity Farms Road, from PGA to Donald Ross, that whole recently paved road is now going to get repaved again to add in bike lanes. So we have an opportunity right now with something that just came up to do it right, to do it properly, to get Commissioner Sachs's idea perhaps for a divided lane for those bicycles or a separation for those bicycles. So if we're really going to fund it, why don't we take this opportunity for this new funding coming through and do it right? And then make that the shining example of how we're going to do it for the rest of the county.
Is that a DOT project? Okay, there's a reason why I'm asking that. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry, Joni.
That's okay. in looking at this specific example, why we don't know why he ran the red light, but he said he wasn't distracted. I know that the sun in your eyes sometimes is a huge issue. So I understand the design of roadways and buffer bicycle lanes and things like that, but it seems like there's some other options we might be able to do that may be a lot less expensive and have a lot more immediate effect on people's safety as well. So if these back plates are something that's not expensive, is this something we can talk to the county or FDOT about, at least on new intersection installs for lights, to make sure they go on every one, or creating a program where we can identify the intersections that need them and move forward with that? So I think there's some little steps that can be done that maybe are more financially feasible immediately. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know my husband personally was hit by a car on his bike because the driver could not see him because of the sun being in his eyes. So I just wanted to bring up that maybe there's some other options we can move on quicker.
Okay. Who was up? Who was first? Go ahead, Melissa.
Well, we do have in the city of Palm Beach Gardens, a resident optometrist who could probably come and do a presentation on sunglass safety to help prevent those glare accidents. It would be Dr. Marciano. I just wanted to give a shout out to FDOT on the project that they're doing on State Road 80 right now in the Forest Hill out to Arden. They are doing a very wide pedestrian bicycle path as part of that construction project. And that is probably something, Nick, we should encourage them to do on a lot of their projects. So, and it's far off the road. And I like what they do in Washington, DC too, the street parking. You've got the road, and you've got the street parking, and then between the street parking and the sidewalk is where you have
It's the bicycles, right?
a much better way to design a road. Thanks.
Who I'm trying to figure out, I think. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't see it.
Yeah, mine's more of a question. I mean, I agree with everything we're all saying. I think we're all saying the same thing. But, you know, this, again, looking at this one example, this was people in a crosswalk that got hit. So better bike lanes, buffered bike lanes
Wouldn't
aren't
solve
gonna
that
solve
one.
these problems.
Right.
So what I'd like to see are the stats on where these injuries are occurring. Are people getting hit while they're in bike lanes, or are they being hit in crosswalks? Because you have to know what you're trying to fix before you can fix it. So I think those stats are more helpful before we start figuring out we're going to do these great buffered bike lanes. If that's really only a small percentage of what's happening, it's the crosswalks where the problem are. So let's figure out where the problem is before we try to design a solution. That's my comment.
Valid point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we form a task force. I think that gentleman who just spoke a few minutes ago was excellent, and that's you, but and that let's see what the issues are. Let's see if, as someone has said, that the people are getting hit in the crosswalks, people are getting hit. I think another person spoke about husband being hit while he was, because of the light. Let's see what the issues really are. I think we all kind of know what the issues are, but let's at least delineate them, and then let's find solutions, because we'll be talking about this till the cows come home. So that I would move that that you form a task force and of folks who, especially from the cities, who live with this all the time, and that way we can move forward. As another speaker also spoke about, if we're building roads right now and we're funding them, let's do it the right way. Let's do it the 21st century way. Let's make sure that we build and create our roadways so that we have pathways, safe pathways for pedestrians and for bicyclists. So that's right.
Yeah, just two comments. One, I need to go on record as suggesting that Councilman Napoleon is a mind reader, because he said exactly what I was going to say. Let's separate out in the data intersections versus along the way. The other is, one of the concerns that I'm seeing in our city is we have roads that are already known both for car traffic and pedestrian and bicycle as way overcrowded. And we're under a lot of pressure to approve additional developments that will only put more traffic onto those. And we're always assured that traffic study's been done, it's not going to be a problem. Whereas common sense, we already have a problem. The data on the Vision Zero suggests we're not making progress on that. I would certainly appreciate, as a city council person, some help on more realistic, hey, it might not make sense to put more cars on some of the roads where you already have a problem for these things. Thank you.
Just in closing on two items that came up. Number one, in the way of quick action, Nick, I think you were asked to follow up on the high contrast yellow backplates. And as you know, this is kind of stuff in the town that the council discusses with our police and engineering staff on solutions. So we will be doing that. I'll be following up. But if in fact this is a valid solution, and if in fact that driver had seen, had glare had been a factor and this would solve it, heck, I'd support paying for it. So from a practical standpoint, ask the question differently, not just, about can we plan to do it? Ask them that if in fact some are willing to step up and pay for it, how quickly could we get it done? Because, I see myself doing a corridor and maybe others may want to do the same thing rather than wait for a program that's going to take us years to do. It just seems that could be a quick.
When you say you would pay for it, you mean
The town.
The town. Okay.
Sure. Heck, I might even put my own money into it. I mean, really, if that's what was the cause of somebody dying, right? It doesn't seem like that would be, it seems like something that's practical that could be done, right? So I just wanted to, let's ask the question that way. And then you're giving local governments options that we can get it done as opposed to asking FDOT and waiting years. And then I don't mean that negative. And then secondly, what excites me about Prosperity Farm, just for the record, it's always, I've never felt right as an engineer when we're putting bike lanes on 45-mile-an-hour roads. I think it's crazy. So Prosperity Farms Road, what excites me about that, and though it's not in Jupiter, you'll provide connectivity from Jupiter down into the gardens and whatever. So that's a perfect roadway to have bike lanes on. And so if we're really thinking about safety, let's start thinking more about the speed of the cars that we're putting in contact with the bikes.
All right, I want to get us moving forward, so we'll take one more comment, Bob.
Okay. I'll finish it off. And to the comment that was made by Commissioner Sachs, I think rather than a task force, I would think that maybe we could use the CAC or TAC as an initial point of discussion. So if we could have the Citizens Advisory Commission Council Committee or the Technical Advisory Committee, hand this to them as a task to come back to us with recommendations rather than establishing a brand new task force. I think that would be a first step in the progress of what we're trying to do here. And I thank Mayor Grant for reordering the agenda and allowing us to have
Yes.
this vibrant debate.
But very good discussion. I don't think it's a debate. I think it's a very good discussion. All right, go ahead.
I second.
You
I
his
second what, yeah,
comments?
absolutely.
I'm glad
do
both you and mine, Rita, because I'm sitting here thinking this is probably something we could use one of our committees for, but okay. Did you want to?
I just want to point out that earlier today on our consent agenda, we did approve items appointing people to the Bicycle Trailways Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So I think you already have the mechanism for this type of review in existence.
Okay. All right. Listen, I want to thank everyone. I think it's abundantly clear that this is a very, very important issue for this board. And therefore, it's going to become a very high priority issue. And there are a couple of points I just want to kind of summarize. I think Nick and Andrew, we've given you a lot of good feedback on the characteristics and nature of the data mining or data gathering. I also think it's been suggested that you take the raw data that we're going to get and create what we call metadata. That is, there's an analysis done and it gives you the ability to do interpretation, segmentations, that sort of breakdown. So there's a lot of feedback, and I think very good feedback on how we need to now move forward with our data gathering capability. I already whispered to Nick when we were talking that if he could put together for us to present at our next meeting, board meeting,
what are the actionable type of things that we can do? And these actions will take on different dimensions based on the different scenarios or different classifications of issues that we're looking to resolve. He has, Nick, I don't know if you all realize that over time in many projects that we presented, particularly projects that proposals that came from FDOT, staff has come back with very specific recommendations saying, hey, we really would like to see you include these things for pedestrians. We're going to have to step that up. All right. And I've been saying that all along in terms of being, I don't know if the right word is, but really pushing back on FDOT that I don't see this board approving your projects if you're not going to begin including some of the safety issues that we want in place for our citizens. So what you just told us today is, yes, I think we're all in agreement with that notion, and we will move forward in that as well. The third thing I'm going to ask Nick to do when he comes back is to formalize what mission statement, what mission we want to give to whichever subcommittee that we have with this mission. And I want us to be very specific and put some timeframes around, you know, what we want to hear back from them in terms of what their specific recommendations, so that we can really not just sit here and talk about data, but really talk about what we're going to do to implement to try to get this turned around. So if there are no further questions on this, unless you want to add something, Nick.
Mr. Chair, I was asked just to confirm that this is fantastic discussion, but there were a couple of times where members of this TPA board used the word motion and second, but I think that was relatively loose conversational to indicate support in the discussion. It wasn't actually a motion that we would need to dispatch
Did what we
with
call
a vote.
consensus mode.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that with a relative head nods
And I
from
think we've
the
got-
board. Okay,
I think we have consensus on the passion and concern, and the fact that we're going to make this a priority issue, and we are going to come up with solutions. And not just keep talking about what the problem is, but how do we move the dial, as it was said, to really address these issues? I think it's a responsibility of this board to take that on and to try to make that happen for our citizens. So, okay?
fantastic. And just so the board understands, we're all taking notes on the TPA staff. One of the things that I'm going to do is present updates to our strategic plan, first to the review committee that's going to be meeting next month, and then ultimately to the full TPA board in July. I would expect that this conversation will feed a specific action in that strategic planning document, as well as the implementation of the conversation about a focused task force or assignment to one of our existing advisory committees to bring back some more concrete recommendations based on the analysis of the data. So we hear you, and we will certainly take this up and make it into an actionable outcome so that we can move this needle.
Okay, we're good on that. Andrew, I bet you didn't think your presentation would take this. Well, thank you so much for your information. And I know you've got a lot of good work in front of you, and you're gonna work on improving those things that we talked about. Thank you. Okay, with that, we will now move to agenda item now, which is now 3C, previously 3B, which is a review of our fiscal year 2022 to 2026 draft transportation improvement program. As we all know, this program reflects revenue expectations for the next 5 fiscal years and shows phases and funding services year by year. So with that, we're going to have Jason Price give us an update.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to make one comment. I'm going to remind everybody here of the West Palm Beach rule, which is going to be when this comes before us at the next meeting, it's going to be an up or down vote. We're not going to be able to amend it. So if there's any thoughts of something that is on here that you don't like, today or any time before the next meeting will be an opportunity to have that conversation. But when this comes onto the agenda at the next meeting, there will not be it will be out of order to attempt to remove anything or add anything to this document. And so is that the rule that we're going to use? And
Rule we're going to use, and that was what Nick was going to share with us, but that's okay.
I just want to make sure that we don't have a
You're absolutely
repeat of
correct.
what occurred last time.
We
Thank
won't
you.
have a repeat. You're absolutely correct. You want to add anything to that?
Yep.
He covered it all, right? Okay. You're on, sir.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Price, and I'll be presenting this. This is an informational item, so it will be an action item next month. So just to move on to what our mission statement is to collaboratively plan, prioritize, and fund our transportation system. And this is the funding document in which to do so. And that's our focus today. First, I'll just go over the timeline really quickly. The list of priority projects that the TPA develops is approved in July 2020. That list of priority projects is then provided to FDOT to evaluate funding. And then they incorporate our list of priority projects into the draft tentative work program. That when they develop that, they transmit that to us and we use that to build the draft tip that's before you today. And then next month, we'll provide you a final document for approval and adoption. And then once that is adopted, we'll begin to operate under that new adopted document in the months following. So the tip is divided up into specific sections, and we have three main categories here on the slide. The first is our TPA priority projects. And those subcategories there are state road modifications, local initiatives, and transportation alternatives. The second is the FDOT and local priority projects, and that consists of the strategic intermodal system capacity projects, as well as the other FDOT and local projects, and the other modes of transportation, which include airport, railroad, and seaport. Lastly is the operation and maintenance of those facilities. There is three other sections included in the TIP document to outline the funds and the projects to maintain the system for both the roadway and transit. So the next slide here is the funding breakdown within this TIP document. And you'll see the strategic intermodal system capacity section has the lion's share of the funding outlined here, shown in the bar graph. And a lot of that funding is the state funding and federal funding. Within that state funding source is the turnpike projects that are funded through turnpike revenues. And you'll see that on coming slides. I think it's the very next one. So with that strategic intermodal system, here's just a snapshot of the summary of projects that you see here. And the first one is the turnpike widening projects and interchange modifications. There's a total of 12 of them that amount to $696 million. The next is I-95 interchanges for new or modified interchanges on I-95. And there's about 18 of them that total $222 million. Following that is the I-95 widening from Linton to Okeechobee Boulevard and Indiantown Road to Martin County Line for a total of $10.5 million. And then also Beeline Highway widening. That also includes the Beeline and North Lake intersection, and that's a total of $144 million. And the last item on the list here is State Route 80 turn lanes at Australian Avenue and at State Route 7 for a total of $11 million. Now I'm going to move into those TPA priority projects, those three categories. And the first one is state road modification projects. In this particular category, there's about 181 million for 24 projects in total. And some of those highlights include the construction funding for State Route 7 extension from Okeechobee Boulevard to North Lake Boulevard. There's also construction funded for the State Route 80 lighting project for 2026. And Atlantic Avenue right-of-way funding had increased to 2026. However, the Atlantic Avenue widening from State Route 7 to Lyons Road has been delayed. And there's also funding for the US 1 transit shelters has increased. And lastly, there's several Boca Raton and Palm Beach County signal improvements that have had design funds recently programmed in 2026. Now, the two annual competitive grant programs that the TPA manages, the first being the local initiatives, has a 5-year time horizon. And in this particular tip document from 22 to 26, there's approximately 100 million in funding for about 25 projects. And some of those highlights for those projects include funding was programmed for 2.5 million with as a match for another 2.5 million to purchase train cars for Tri-Rail operated by SFRTA. There's also funding that has been advanced for the town of Palm Beach for a signal interconnect project that will move forward and be constructed in 2022. And lastly, there's funding for construction has been maintained for 5 projects that are listed in 2022. So this next construction year, you'll see upwards of 5 projects from this program come online and be constructed. Now, the other annual grant program that the TPA administers is the Transportation Alternatives Program. Now, that has 13 million programmed in this particular tip document for a total of 15 projects. And some of the highlights you see here on the screen, there's 4 new projects that are fully funded through construction to 2024. And these are all projects from the last grant cycle administered by the TPA that were applied for last year and programmed. Now, next, there's also 6 projects that are going to be constructed in fiscal year 2022, and they've maintained construction through the process. And those a few of those projects are listed here on the bottom of the screen. So in total, all of these, all of these projects are coming online in the near future. And so these programs are producing the projects that have been selected and programmed by the board and by the committees. And there's some other highlights to capture here, and that's for the other 2022 roadway construction projects. And the first one is some resurfacing projects on, as you see on the screen here, on US 441 and Palmetto Park Road and Royal Palm Beach Boulevard. There's also several capacity projects on Palm Beach County roadways that are all widening projects that include 60th Street, Royal Palm Beach Boulevard, Congress Ave, Kirk Road, and Florida Mango Road. All those are capacity projects with widening opportunities. And the last one is a bridge replacement project over the I-51 canal. Take a drink of water. Now, all the projects that I just highlighted in the previous few slides are, you can find most of them in the summary tables, and the summary tables are in both of your executive summary and the draft tip. And in these summary tables, they begin with the year that the project was prioritized and ranked, followed by some additional information about the project, and then the common 4 years that you see in the tip as projects progress through the document. What's new is the new 5th year. Fiscal year 2026 is where all of the new funding is being programmed for as part of the adoption of this document. So it's important to highlight that when you see funding in fiscal year 2026, that is the new 5th year that is in this document, which makes it different from the currently adopted tip. And then if there's any changes in any of these projects, we highlight those changes in the notes to the far right. And those changes will typically occur in the common 4 years of the project. Now, as part of this year's review of this tip document, we've presented this document to all of the committees, and we've asked each one of these committees to review the TPA priority projects with an eye on looking at the accuracy of the project, as well as the funding outlined in each of the projects, specifically for the TPA priority projects. And I would extend that to the board members as well to review the projects that are the TPA priority projects. And the second thing is to review the FDOT and Palm Beach County projects in your area for an opportunity to recommend scope modifications. And this is one of those opportunities, as we discussed in the previous presentation, to recommend safety or multimodal improvements in your area if they can be accommodated as part of the project. And if that's possible, we're encouraging you to reach out to our executive director if you see projects that could accommodate or you would like to request some type of modification. And so to facilitate that, we have created a map, the interactive map that we have on our website that was referred to in the last presentation as well for the bicycle crashes. It's palmbeachtpa.org/map. You can also use the same map with a new layer that is created and added to this for the draft tip projects for 2022 through 2026. So in using the same map, you can use the municipal boundary layer to outline the boundaries for your local area. Click on the map and highlight that area, highlight the projects in your area. And when you highlight the area, when you find projects in this draft tip layer, when it's turned on, a pop-up box will come up when you click on a project. And that pop-up box will give you all of the additional information that will highlight what type of project it is, what are the limits of the project, what type of what's happening at this location, and who the responsible agency is, along with other additional information. So this is really created to facilitate looking at the project within the draft tip within your local area. And it's a pretty good, useful tool to utilize. So that is the conclusion of the presentation for this draft tip. If you have any questions.
Of course, we have questions.
Of course we have questions.
I think Steve was first.
Thank you. And I'm glad everyone liked the conversation for 3C in front of this. One of the aspects of that was that I believe I had a conversation with Nick about the interchange on Boynton Beach Boulevard, not having the shared use paths, about having bike lanes. Part of the tip item, I think 17.2, for Boynton Beach Boulevard from I-95 to US 1 was reconstruct narrow vehicle lanes, construct 9-foot sidewalk on north, 15-foot shared use path on south, pedestrian lighting. Environmental justice is based upon Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and it's not based on the natural environment. It's based on the human environment. And I want to make sure that we were named by 55places.com the most affordable place to live in the country. And if that's the case, I want to make sure that everybody that is moving down here to live in Palm Beach County affordably, that they have safe ways to get to our new downtown. And that's why I believe, Nick, you said that we can remove it from the tip and ask for a cost analysis of the shared use path for the interchange.
If I can give the board a little more context to
Yes,
this
thank you.
question. There is a project in the tip to reconstruct the interchange of I-95 at Boynton Beach Boulevard. The department has proposed as part of the FDOT has proposed as part of that project, the inclusion of on-street bike lanes and relatively narrow minimum width sidewalks. And the conversation we've had with the mayor and with the city staff of Boynton Beach is perhaps we could reduce the size of the on-street bike lanes in order to provide a wider shared use path, or at least a wider sidewalk that would promote bicycling and pedestrian activity off the roadway, so that there's the curb between the road, the vehicles traveling through the interchange and the people traveling by bike or by car through the by bike or on foot through the interchange. Conversations that the staff have had with the DOT have not resulted in that modification. And so one of the questions for the TPA board is, we heard the safety discussion, and how do we leverage the impact of this agency to produce change? One of the questions is, would the board like to remove that project from the TIP document that would be presented to you next month for adoption, to allow that conversation to occur between the TPA, the city, and the DOT, and then the DOT would have an opportunity to bring that project back at a future meeting to amend it into the tip so that they can restore the funding for that project once they have heard the concerns from the city and done everything they can to address them and provide a safer interchange. Long story short, I think the mayor would like to remove the Boynton Beach interchange so that we can force DOT to have a better conversation with the city about how to build the project in a safer way.
Remove the project, get with FDOT to have them rework it to include the safety features that we'd like to see.
It's the cost analysis. So if they tell us no, they can't do it, we want to know why.
Well, I think.
And
by
if
act-
and it's money, the answer is money.
Well, the answer is always money, but the point is, I just want to kind of crystallize the action that we're looking to take. And the purpose of the action is pull it, rework it, and then we'll review it. And based on that review, we'll determine, does it get back on?
As is or as amended.
I think what we're saying is it has to be amended.
No, it doesn't have to be amended because if the cost analysis shows that it's not 100,000, not a million, it's 10 million.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying, though. You're saying if the cost analysis is significantly increased in the reworking, you would not want to see us go forward with it?
Yeah, if it's $10 million more, I don't think that's.
Let's cross that, no pun intended, but let's cross that bridge when we get to it.
So that's kind of where it's that aspect of FDOT, making sure that when they're trying to do interchanges on I-95 here in Palm Beach County, we want to make sure that the people walking and biking have the safest routes possible. And, there's different interchanges possible. For example, on Glaze Road, we're getting a diverging diamond. This is not a type of that interchange, which is much more expensive. So that's where the cost analysis goes for us as a board, because we're spending taxpayers' dollars to determine what is the best. Because if we spend more money on this project, that means less money and other projects. And that's kind of where I want to make sure that we have the best information in regards to making sure our roads are the safest.
All right, I'm not sure who was next here. Is it you, Bob?
So
Or
do you
Jim?
need anything from me as an emotion or
Well,
because this is
we have to come back
informational?
to that. I want to give everybody else a chance to, we have other people who want to make comments before we act on we'll come back to you about creating a motion, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, I just, and this is along the lines of my comments when we were getting the update as far as the appropriations coming out of Representative Frankel's office, where she has one earmark for a new train car for $4 million. And in our tip, we have 2.5 million being matched by another 2.5 million for a train car. So is that redundant or is that a different train car?
Is it 2 train cars or?
It's two train cars.
Okay, so we're sending Steve 2 train cars.
They're expensive.
Okay, I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure. I mean, again, this goes to my earlier comments. I mean, we're getting all this money pushed into the economy for infrastructure and transportation. And I'm just trying to understand how our normal planning and programming of dollars is being impacted by those dollars that are coming through real quickly. So in this particular instance, you're saying that it's not a question of one or the other, it'll be in essence 2 train cars.
That's right.
Okay, very good. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Jim, were you next?
I have a particular project I want to talk about, and there's some questions associated with it. It's probably best for me to just get them all out and Nick and staff can answer. So a particular project near and dear to my heart for a long time has been associated with an Indian Town Road interchange mod and what I call a state road modification that the town is funding. So we basically, in one regard, we were grateful to FDOT to take it on. But I think it's, so one question, I'm going to go through it all before I ask for an answer. I guess because it started out as an interchange mod, that's the project type. Although for me, it's a state road modification that's important. So number one, can you clarify on what project type that is? That's the Indian Town Road project. And I have the number, Nick, but I think you know about it. But this came up in January And because it had been pushed back a year when we had seen the tentative work program. And I appreciate the board sent on that issue about the delay to the District 4 secretary. And in my mind, in what we got in February was, sorry, we called when we're going to do stuff. I mean, really was a non-responsive in my opinion, and he may feel otherwise, but it was. Because the issue there is that we funded, millions of dollars that we've given over to FDOT. And so the frustrating thing I have is with him just stopping work and putting it out is we're not advancing where we could to at least be shovel ready, which should always be a priority. I mean, they have our money and delaying it just is going to cost us more money. So as a minimum, Nick, on that one, could you find out if in fact they're at least proceeding like with right-of-way acquisitions and engineering? Because if that was the case, I could more accept that, right? But what we're seeing is like it got delayed a year and they stop immediately when they have our money. It's just so, if that project is in here when I think it is, and respect the vice chair's guidance here, you can't change it. It's an upper yes or no. I'm going to vote no because they've been irresponsive to us. But it'd be nice if they can at least come back and offer, an olive branch and say, well, yeah, we'll continue with the engineering so that if we do get the funding, we can make up ground and we'll bring it back in, right? So the answer I got didn't give me any hope. And there's a solution here. They have our money. Doesn't need to sit in the bank. They can get it shovel ready. We talked earlier about when programs come up, the first one that gets an opportunity is shovel ready one. That one should have been done years ago. So anything you can give me between now and next meeting, Nick, on guidance, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, will do.
You know where you got that information? You know where he got that information
I'm not sure which information.
about them pulling it and waiting?
Oh, so, Mr. Chair, what Councilman Koretsky is referring to is when the draft work program was presented to the TPA board in January, they noted that the Indian Town Road I-95 interchange project, which has significant funding from the town of Jupiter, I want to say $3.5–4 million maybe from the town, combined with another $4–5 million from DOT. It was delayed from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24. The construction funding was. And the DOT's explanation was revenue shortfalls caused a domino of delays based on COVID-19. And so when we responded to their draft work program, we said, okay, we understand what you've presented to us, but we would like you to do everything you can to restore the schedule of that particular project because of the local funding provided to you. And DOT responded in February and said, we really don't have the ability to do that. But I think Councilman Koretsky's response today is right on the money. We want to ensure that all other steps are occurring so that should additional funding come available, the construction schedule can be accelerated and the project can be built when it was originally intended.
Yes.
And we're certainly working as TPA staff, we're working with the department to confirm that information and to position this project to be shovel worthy, shovel ready. But I will get a more firm confirmation that all appropriate steps are being taken on the DOT side so that it's positioned for success.
Thank you. My vote, yes, would depend on that.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, I was following up on Mayor Grant's comment. I'm not sure I fully understand all the details, but I think what it was getting at was a little bit related to the culture issue that he raised earlier. And I'm commenting because we have a similar issue with the Double Diamond interchange on I-95, compounded by the fact that we have a school on the opposite side of the bulk of Lake Worth on the opposite side of 95. I agree, if I understand the concern correctly, it is when FDOT comes back and says, we're very sorry, we can't change anything, it is what it is. Can we at least get a cost reason as to why you can't change anything? That seems like a minimum, especially when we're talking about, potential fatalities and really trying to encourage multimodal. When I look at the numbers that we're going on the budget and we're talking, hundreds of millions for road traffic kinds of things, for vehicle traffic, and much, much less for pedestrian and bicycle. Let's put a little bit of pressure back on FDOT that, we really need you to step up on some of this.
Put a lot of bit of pressure.
Okay, I'll go with a lot. I'm in it a lot. Up vote.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner McKinley.
Thank you. I want to talk about Pahokee for a second here. A couple good projects in here. The one along State Road 715 that will actually run from Belglade to Pahokee. That's on the state road modifications. But there's also an intersection, and I believe DOT was doing a traffic study, a safety study look at its Market Street, Lake Avenue, and where Muck City Road comes out right in front of the track store. And there's I believe it's the US Sugar train tracks that are right there at that intersection. It is so dangerous. We did get Palm Tran to move the bus stop that was there. It was pretty close to the tracks. But if we could get an update, Nick, from DOT where they are on that traffic study. And then the other road is they are getting ready. The signs are up, letting people know that the road will be closed, and that's coming out Connors Highway. And where Connors Highway, you can either curve around and go to right by the post office and then hang a right and head north up 441 there along the lake up into Martin County and Okeechobee County. Or you can go straight and then you skip that stop sign at the post office there and you go to a stop sign and turn right and you go up 441. That little segment, and I don't know if that's a county road or if that's part of Connors Highway and US 98, but that is maybe a quarter mile of just a horrible road that is probably 90% pedestrian traffic because most of the big trucks can't fit on it. If we could look at that, and if you could let us know who's in charge of that road, and Todd's here, maybe he can see if it's a county road, but we need to do something along that. Also, I want to stick up for the city of West Palm Beach here on page 49. It is the project on Parker Avenue from Forest Hill Boulevard to Nottingham Boulevard, constructing buffered separated bike lanes and pedestrian lighting. As a mom who spent about 6 years combined between 3 kids who attended Forest Hill High School, that is heavily trafficked by students, and anything we can do to eliminate car traffic having to go in and out of that school along that segment of Forest Hill Boulevard. If we can make it safer for kids to walk and to ride their bikes, I support it, bumping that one up if we have to, just because there's no way to expand that roadway and it's really dangerous to our students. And I'm sure similar situations at Lake Worth High School as well. And then the last question I had under new FDOT projects, the US 27 bridge, 27 miles north of I-75. Yes, that's my district. If anybody ever wants to drive my district, you're welcome to join me. That is a South Florida Water Management District initiated project, it says here in the notes. Is that something that they're doing to elevate a bridge to benefit water flow? Do you know?
I'm not exactly sure, but I can follow up and find out.
Okay, because if that is a project to raise a bridge to allow for water to flow south, we might, Nick, be able to look at some other alternative funding sources, given the American Rescue Plan dollars that the state has received for water quality type projects.
That
We
would be
may-
considered, that would be considered a water quality issue if that's what they're doing?
If they're trying to flow the water south and take out a
That's
concrete
huge.
impediment.
Yeah. Need to look into that.
Let me investigate that one a little further. That's actually funded by the Water Management District. It's not using
Any of our funds?
it's not using any DOT funding. It's not using roadway funding. But I don't, because of that, I'm less familiar with the exact source of money being used by the Water Management District. So let me investigate that a little more, and then we can see if there are alternative ways to make it,
Thank
to
you.
fund it.
cards? Seeing none, then I'm going to go back to the question raised by Mayor Grant. You're on, Mayor. You wanted to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to remove the Boynton Beach Boulevard interchange with I-95 from the tip. Is that correct, Nick?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Who second? Okay, all right. All right, we have a motion and a second. Did you want to make a comment?
Just very quickly to say that we recently went through a similar situation in Boca where FDOT is rebuilding and improving an interchange in Boca. And we had the opportunity over a course of time, both the city and the TPA, to interface with the FDOT about certain improvements we wanted to see made. Sometimes they were receptive, sometimes they weren't. But just as a very fundamental matter, I think it's important that the state engage with their city partners, and for that matter, the TPA, to try to hear us and implement where they can the safety improvements that they want. So we stand with you. I stand with you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, we have a motion and a second to remove this item from the draft TIP. I'm sorry, too many acronyms. Paul, how should we do this? Does it have to be a roll call?
Sorry about that. I don't think that it does. You're really not adopting the tip today. You're simply making adjustments to it.
Okay. Margie, do you have anyone out there who has a public comment on this item, this subject, the whole presentation?
No, not at this time, Mr. Chair.
And you have no comment card submitted?
No, sir.
All right, so we're going to close public comment then on this information brief. And with that, we have a motion and a second to remove this item from the draft tip. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? There are no opposed. Margie, let the record show that it was approved to be removed unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions on that, on this item, agenda item, I'd like to move forward to item 3D, which is partner updates, agency updates. Do we have any partner agencies who want to give us an update? Okay, seeing none, we'll move from there. Item 4 is, these are administrative items. Are there any members here on the board who would like an update on these items, 4A and 4B? Seeing none. And then we're going to stand it to adjourn. Our next meeting is June 17th. I just want to say that I know these meetings are running a bit long, but I do think that we're having the kind of dialogue and discussions that we should be having as a board. And I appreciate those of you who were able to stay. And I understand some people had to leave because they had other commitments, but thank you very much. We stand adjourned.